Welcome to this video on Post-Exam Reflection, Tweaking Your Plan by Heather Lumen. The power of planning. Perhaps you have heard the expression, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. Or sometimes people will say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So let's do away with magical thinking and make a plan for our success. Your instructor should have given you a form that looks something like this. You will put your name up the top and your total course average should be right here as a percent, and then you can circle the letter grade next to it. Then below that you have broken down the portions of your grade. Now the actual parts of your grade and the percents associated with them will vary from course to course. This is just a sample. Okay, and what you have to do is for any part of your grade, written homework, online homework, any of this thing where you are earning less than a 90%, you have to explain what you would do differently to improve that part of your grade. And if you have a 90% or higher in any of these parts, you don't need to do that. So let's just take an example. I'm completely making all of this stuff up, so don't feel like any student past, present, is getting picked on. So let's say some student has a homework average of 76, and in order to improve that grade, they write these 4 things. They say that they'll spend more time on the homework, get help, study more, and turn in all homework assignments. So what I want you to think about, remember in a previous video we talked about not just making SMART goals, but SMART plans. And SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So I want you to pause this video and think of which of these 4, if any of them, which of these meet that criteria. Well, unfortunately, none of them meet that criteria. So let's think about how we could rewrite some of these statements in order to make them meet this criteria and to be a little bit more self-reflective. So let's take the statement, spend more time on homework. Well, first of all, this begs the question, well, how much time were you spending? How much time will you spend in the future, right? So we kind of need to answer that question. So let's suppose that this particular student reflects a little bit more and realizes that they were actually trying to finish the homework right before class. So the problem wasn't really exactly that they weren't spending enough time on it. They weren't, but it was just because they were leaving it to the last minute. So in that case, the student would maybe say, I will begin the homework right after class, so I have plenty of time to finish it, and so it's still fresh in my head. And then they want to make sure they don't rush the assignment and that they check their work, right? So that kind of covers all the bases. But so let's think about this. Is it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound? Well, they're definitely specific about when they're going to do their homework, right? It's a little bit hard to be specific as far as the end time for homework because I don't know about you. I mean, for me, I never know exactly how long the task is going to take. So we're just sort of assuming that the student, doesn't have another class right after when they said they're going to work on the homework. So they hopefully are leaving enough time for them to do that. Okay, measurable, definitely. They can measure the fact that they're starting the homework right after class. Certainly achievable, certainly relevant, right? It addresses the issue, which is that they were waiting until right before class to finish it. And time-bound, again, they're giving a specific time associated with it when they're going to at least begin the homework. Okay? So taking the same statement, spend more time on homework, another question that I think is very important to ask, because I see this a lot, is more time really the issue? Sometimes students think that they just need to study more, spend more time on homework, and the time issue might not be the problem, right? So let's pretend that this imaginary student realizes that actually they were spending plenty of time, right? They start just measuring how much time they're spending and they realize they're giving themselves plenty of time, but they're still getting the problems wrong. So maybe time isn't the problem. So then they could use Photomath or Graphing or some sort of software to check their answers, right? Because remember, homework, it's not a proctored assignment. So it's fine to use tools if you're using them wisely, right? You're not using them just to do the problems, you're using them to check your work. So then let's pretend this person, goes back and checks them using Photomath. Then they should be able to rework the problem to get the answer, the correct answer. If they still don't understand, they're like, oh my gosh, the answer is x equals 7. I have no idea. I don't understand how that is, right? Then hopefully they're starting the assignment soon enough, then they can use Math on Demand or Office Hours or Student Success Center or something in order to get help. So let's compare this statement and make sure that it meets our SMART goals. So it is specific, right? It's very specific on the action they're going to achieve, measurable for sure, achievable, relevant, right? It's relevant because they identified the problem. They realized upon further reflection, the time wasn't the issue, but actually the accuracy of their answers. And time bound, I guess, because they're going to do this for every assignment. So it's clear when they're going to do this. All right, let's do another example. So let's take the statement get help. So right now it is definitely not a SMART goal or a SMART plan. How can we make it so? Well, the question that occurs to me is who is going to give you the help? When are you going to get the help, or where are you going to go to get help, right? So to answer these questions, the student needs to remember, consult the list of ways to get help and support, and cross-reference them with their schedule, their availability. So let's say a student says, I will use office hours right after class on Mondays and Wednesdays to get help with my homework. I will also use Math on Demand to answer these questions, outside of these answers. So I like this approach because it's two-pronged, right? It's not solely relying on one method of getting help because, for example, right, the office hours after class, Mondays and Wednesdays, right? Well, what if they have a question on a Friday, right? What if it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class? How are they going to get help? What if they have to go home and pick up their sibling or somewhere and then, they can't stay that day? Or what if they're sick, right? How else are they going to get help? So it's really good to have, a plan and then a backup plan. Okay, so again, this is very specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Okay, what if a student says, well, I'm gonna study more, right? I have a lot of questions about this. Well, what does that look like for you? How much time will you spend? And more importantly than the amount of time is, what are you going to do? What are you going to spend that time doing? And another question, is the problem that you need to spend more time studying, or is that you need to change the way that you study, right? So it's a very open-ended statement, and it just begs a lot of questions, and it really demands a lot more self-reflection. So let's suppose on reflection that a student realizes, well, they understand things as they learn them, but they realize, by the time they get to the exam, they've forgotten, what they learned in the first few sections. Let's say that's the problem. So a solution for this student might be that in addition to completing the homework, they will complete one question from each of the previous sections that will be on the next exam. So let's pretend we're in chapter 2, right? So they do 2.1, the homework. Then they do 2.2 homework, and after they do 2.2 homework, they go back and do one problem from 2.1. And then maybe when they get to 2.3, they do the 2.3 homework and they go back and do one problem from 2.1 and one problem from 2.2, right? So you kind of keep it fresh in their brains. So that would be a good solution. And again, this is very specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. They're very clear about what they're going to do. All right, what if a student just says, well, they look at their grades and they realize, oh gosh, I have a lot of zeros on my homework, so I'm just going to make sure, in the future I turn in all my homework assignments. Well, again, it's true that this happens. Sometimes you have a low homework average, again, just because you have zeros, because you didn't turn some in. But simply saying that you will turn the assignments in the future doesn't really get to the root of the issue, right? I think it's important to think about, well, why didn't you turn them in the past? What hindered you, and what's going to change? What's going to be different in the future that's going to make sure you can turn in the homework assignments? So let's say a student realizes that they had been late to class due to transportation issues, and that's why they couldn't do the homework. So they completed the assignment, they just got there late, and it was after you were allowed to turn it in. So a student might say, I will try to catch an earlier bus to school, even if it means getting to campus a bit early so that I get to turn in the homework. Right? That would be a reasonable solution, right? That's a SMART goal. Let's say a different student realizes, you know what, I always forget. I don't remember that I have the homework, and then I get to class and, I try to finish it up in like the 5 minutes before class starts, and it's just not enough. So that person, maybe would say, well, I will create reminders on my phone before I leave class so I don't forget to do the homework. Or another student, if they were able to, might say, I'm just going to knock the homework right after class. I'm just going to complete it right after class before I even leave campus, and that way I can't forget to do it. Right? So those are just different reflections for different solutions for different students. And again, both of those solutions are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So I just want to talk to you for a moment about the value of self-reflection. It's true that you may not use the math you learn in this class after you graduate, but the skill of self-reflection will last a lifetime. This skill can help you understand what is and what isn't working. You can apply it in your professional life, in relationships, and in your personal life. It can help you set goals and achieve them. So, final tips and takeaways. This self-reflection activity is for you. Your instructor, that's me, really cares about you as a student and as a person and wants to see you succeed. Please take this opportunity to reflect on your performance in this course and figure out what you can do to improve if needed. If you want to meet with your instructor to complete this form or ask for help, please don't hesitate to ask.